Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Sekani, a podcast for people in their 20s who are trying to figure out life and not get lost along the way. Today's guest is Andrew Parr, a UK therapist, trainer, and author with more than 33 years of clinical experience and over 20,000 one-to-one sessions behind him. His book, The Real You, published by Penguin Life, explores a fascinating idea that lasting transformation isn't really about fixing ourselves, but about seeing through the invisible conditioning that shaped us. Over the years, Andrew has trained more than 500 practitioners and root cause approach to change. His work challenges much of what we traditionally think as therapy and personal development, arguing that many of the struggles we experience aren't who we truly are, but patterns we unconsciously inherited from childhood, culture, and life experiences. Today, we'll explore why people stay stuck, why most self-help misses, and how we can begin uncovering what Andrew calls the real you. Andrew, welcome to Conversations with Sekani. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
All right. So yes, can you take us back to your younger years, basically? So what kind of environment shaped you growing up?
It depends how far back we go. Okay, so my younger years were were pretty good, but I was adopted. So 10 days old, I was put up for adoption. So I think that probably shaped me in my very, very early years, because anyone who's ever seen a young baby, you hand them around the room and they cry until you give them back to the mother. But people like myself who are
Mm.
adopted are never given back. So something happens there, and that sets up something inside of us. So I think that shaped me in many ways. My adoptive parents, the people I call mum and dad, were great. Usual ups and downs of a bit of a stressful life, but they find they worked hard and they gave us a holiday once a year, and they were as loving as they could be. So that was great. Um, Though they did die when I was 21. My mother of a brain tumor, my dad of a heart attack within 2 months of each other. So it was like a second loss, should we say? I think I lost parents twice. So that it was that set me on a bit of a roller coaster ride that caused me to crash. Eventually, I went from being a punk rock guitarist in London with spiky blonde hair running around all over the place. Everything fell apart, and that's when I got into the therapy training. So that was my early 20s was getting into that, should we say? That gives you a quick potted history of my early days. So.
All right. Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm really sorry for your loss, right? Even though it's part of what has shaped who you are today,
Mm,
basically. So
thank you.
yes, and another thing, I want us to, dive into your early 20s, right? So
Yeah.
for what belief, or should I say assumptions about yourself did you carry in your 20s that you later discovered were not actually true?
I thought I was invincible. Okay. In my early 20s, right? Like many of us, I thought I could do everything and push everything and, survive on 2 hours sleep and run around doing everything possible. And that somehow the world owed me something and that, I could just have anything I wanted. And all that was there in my 20s. And gradually, as I was overworking, because I was doing the music by day, engineering by night, and running away from everything that happened in my life, should we say, and just trying to get love really is what I was doing. All the performing, all the strutting around on stages, all the look at me, all that attention, and just trying to get love, I think, which I lost because of my other experiences. So that's what my most of my 20s were like that, really. They were just, I wasn't particularly grown up. I was rather immature, but thought I was, on the outside, thought I was doing pretty well, but inside I knew I wasn't because every time I pushed myself, I felt this inner thing just kind of was eating away inside. So there was always this mismatch between what I presented to the world and what I was really like inside. So that was pretty much my most of my 20s, shall we say.
Hmm, wow. All right. And another thing I've noticed recently too is that most of our childhood, I don't should I say trauma? No, not trauma, but the way we were trained as a child it comes back into our adult life. Those patterns can actually be seen in our adult life, right? And I would like for us to, discuss that as the
Mm.
conversation goes by, basically. But
Yeah.
then I want us to, talk about understanding conditioning. So, after 20,000 sessions, what pattern became impossible to ignore?
What pattern? The pattern. Yeah, the pattern was that the the people and circumstances in people's lives may change, like the
Mm,
characters in a play, but the thoughts and feelings and emotions they had within them were almost identical to whatever the conditioning patterning was. So somebody who was made to feel a certain way when they were a young child, for example, those exact thoughts, words, the things they said to themselves would come up again, maybe in a work situation or maybe in a relationship situation or a social situation. They say exactly the same things. And it's uncanny, but thousands of times I've had people tell me about their life now. Then when we get to the core, they're saying the exact same words. And I just pause for a moment and say, can you hear that? Do you hear what you're saying? And they go, yeah, yeah, I hear it. I feel it. So it's like unconsciously, we're like a magnet to recreate the same feelings we were conditioned to feel if something imprinted in us in an early age. It doesn't have to be an early age, it's just easier to imprint when it's earlier because we can't contradict it so well. And it's that, yeah, those early difficulties, thoughts, feelings, emotions we take on board will find a way to repeat themselves until we resolve it. And that will come up in all sorts of areas of life. Yeah.
mm, wow. I like that you mentioned conditioning, right? So, for people out there who don't know, what exactly is conditioning?
Conditioning. Okay, right. So I tend to describe it in two ways. There's emotional conditioning, which is the kind I was describing just then. That's say, if you're little, if you're young, and somebody says something or does something and it makes you feel not good enough in some way, you can internalize that as I am not good enough, I am not worthy, I'm not lovable enough, I'm not likable. Then you're conditioning yourself emotionally. So there's emotional conditioning like that, should we say. Then there's neurological conditioning or Hebbian learning, it's called, which is where if you do something often enough, your brain kind of wires like a
Mm,
well-trodden path through woods. And an example I often give to this is my wife runs a bakery and she makes organic cakes, and we have literally big bags, sacks of chocolate buttons around in our kitchen. And my eldest son, when he was younger, he'd wander into the kitchen, grab a handful of chocolate buttons, and he was about to scoff them. I said, "Oi, chocolate tax, come on, cough up." So he had to pay me a few chocolate buttons every time he did it. And I developed a habit, a chocolate button habit, because every time he was nicking them, he gave me a few chocolate buttons. And then when I sat in the kitchen, I started to think, well, where's the chocolate buttons? Where are they? The two became associated together. So you get this
mm,
conditioning where neurons that fire together wire together, right? So if you do something and then you do something else, the brain will automatically go to it. So let's say if somebody feels upset and they went and had a drink or food or a drug, for example, and they did that enough, the two things get wired together. So there's emotional conditioning and then there's neurological conditioning. When I do this, this happens. And either way, they both
mm,
work together, which is why sometimes it's difficult for people to solve problems because they're trying to think, well, how do I stop this? But they got emotional conditioning and they got neurological Hebbian learning conditioning going on. And
mm.
that can make it difficult to make changes.
Wow. Emotional conditioning
Mm.
and neurological conditioning.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I can't help but think, right? Are we all hypnotized by our childhood? Do you
I
think
think
we are?
we're hypnotized by life, by life, should we say? Yeah, life hypnotizes
Mm,
us, and a lot of that happens in childhood because we don't have the critical faculty to challenge it. So an authority figure says something or does something, we internalize it, and it's effectively hypnotizing us. And then we go through the life and seeing the world through a filter, seeing the world that way until we can challenge it. And sad thing is most people don't realize that. They think, oh, it's just me, it's just the way I am. It's just what happens. They don't realize they've been conditioned or life has conditioned them. And actually you can undo that and have a different set of experiences.
mm. All right, wow. Okay, so I also want us to, talk about why people stay stuck,
Mm,
right? So Why do some people, spend years in therapy, or should I say self-help, and they
Mhm.
still feel trapped, basically?
Yeah, a great question. So sometimes when because I run a training school where I teach practitioners, I teach it, said you've got to look out for what I call Einstein loops. Okay, so Albert Einstein is quoted as saying, you cannot solve a problem with the same thinking that created it.
Mm,
Right? And yet that's what most of us try and do when we have personal problems. So the same, I'll try and give you an example in a moment, the same thought or belief system or conditioning that creates the problem, we tend to try and solve it by thinking the same way. So using the not good enough feeling, someone who thinks they're not good enough or feel they're not good enough inside will try and do things to be good enough and make themselves good enough in order to feel better. All right. So they'll use self-help tactics or positive mindset or some kind of therapy thing. How can I improve my life? How can I feel better? How can I do this? But as long as they're doing that from a position of I'm not good enough and trying to make themselves good enough, they're stuck in that loop. Whereas what they need to do is get outside of the loop that says they're not good enough and accept that they are anyway, independent of everything else.
mm,
Right. And that's quite hard to spot. I've given a simple example, but it's quite hard to spot when you're in it yourself because you think you're operating from reality, but you're not. We're operating from a false belief system. And that's what keeps people stuck. They're usually trying to solve a problem at the wrong level, the wrong layer. Whereas if you can step outside of that and get down to the deeper layer within yourself, and they tend to come down to a few core ideas. Okay. One is I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy, I don't deserve, something like that. Second one is I don't feel safe or the world doesn't feel safe for me. The third one is I feel stuck, I feel helpless, I feel powerless to do something about it. The fourth one is I don't feel accepted, I don't fit in, I don't belong. And the fifth one is somehow I've equated love with pain. So my connections, my relationships end up in pain rather than pleasure. So everything filters down into one of those kind of five core ideas in a way. And if people are not addressing it at that level, they're usually just dealing with symptoms rather than causes. And that's why a lot of people end up stuck.
yeah. All right. So, what role do you think self-worth plays in, keeping people stuck?
Yeah, self-worth is kind of the one that sits at the bottom of all of it, really.
Mm,
Because if you don't have a good perception of your self-worth, it's going to sabotage, pretty much everything we do. And I did say, choose the words quite carefully. You cannot lose self-worth. Everyone is always worthy, but you can lose your perception of it. All right.
mm,
So
right.
when you say, oh, you need better self-worth or greater self-worth, your self-worth is always there. You've just got to recognize it, remember it's there. All right.
Mm,
Sometimes I use the image of, let me see, I got it. This little, like a diamond. Okay. So this is you, how you came into the world, right?
mm,
And then life, people said things or did things, and it starts to cover that over. All right.
mm,
And maybe it covers it in false beliefs and ideas that of doubt and fear and worry. And until when we look in the mirror, what we see is all the grime and the dirt's been chucked at us rather than what's really there. And then we try and put some pretty things on top to try and make it look better and do things to try and feel worthy, feel good enough. But actually, that's working at the wrong level. What you have to do is peel it away, peel the layers away, peel the false ideas, and get back to the. That's why I come about the real you. Get back to the real you, the real self, the authentic self,
mm,
and then you feel good, you feel safe, you feel secure in yourself, you feel comfortable, you feel confident, and that's when you
mm,
tend to be happier in life and be more successful. And especially, people in their 20s, for example, often that's a time when you've gone through difficulties in childhood or challenges in teenage years. The 20s is often a time when you can run away from that for a while and you can break free from it. It's a decade where typically you kind of sticking two fingers up to family and doing
mm,
your own thing in life. Okay.
mm,
But by the time you get to 30, that's when it starts to catch up with you. All right. So a lot of people in their 20s, yeah, I'm fine, I'm good. Not everyone, I know a lot of people get difficulties, but you can run away from it for a while because that's what we're designed to do to break free and create our own lives. But it can start beginning to catch up in your 30s. So be aware of it. We don't have to spend all our time, therapizing ourselves, but if you just be aware that this stuff's going on, That's the first important step.
Wow. Ooh, conditioning. Okay,
Mm.
so first of all, I would like to say I feel lucky to be hearing this right in my 20s from you,
Yes.
basically. Right, I feel so lucky and blessed, and I would say thank you, Andrew, for sharing such important insights with us today. And also, I want us to also touch on anxiety and futurizing because
Mm.
anxiety is one of the major problem in my generation today.
Yeah.
Right. So you've spoken about futurizing. First of all, what does it mean? Right. And why do you think people are constantly living in anxiety and they are also, constantly living in tomorrow instead of today, basically?
Yeah, no, good question. So futurizing, by that I mean, as you said, living in tomorrow rather than today. So first of all, you have to understand what happens in the mind, in the body. So there's a system called the threat response, or the fight or flight response, many people know it as. So if there's danger, we either fight it, we run away from it, we freeze to try and hide from it. Those are the three uh, main versions of it, designed to help protect us from physical attack. It's a primitive response, going back to the history of the human race. However, the same process can be activated if we just imagine something. So our
Mm,
body doesn't know the difference between a real threat and an imagined threat. So if we start imagining stressful situations, what if this goes wrong? What if that happens? What if I can't do this? What if I don't do that? And that creates fear and worry in us. Our body goes into this fight or flight response. It goes into well, I've got a problem here, I've got to deal with it. But because there's nothing to deal with physically, that the body starts getting stressed and starts building up stress hormones. And our
mm,
mind can't do it because we can't run away from our own thoughts. We can't run away or
mm,
fight them. We're kind of stuck, basically. So when we start futurizing, which is imagining fearful outcomes or what I call terrifying tomorrows, which may not be tomorrow, it could be next week or next year or 10 minutes' time,
mm,
the mind activates that fight system. And that's what creates anxiety. Anxiety is the fear response. The fear response is designed for short-term use, maybe a few minutes to help us deal with this situation. It's not designed for long-term use every day, waking up every day, worrying about what's going to happen. So futurizing and worrying about the future keeps that process overactivated. It means we're not living in the present. The body can deal with present moment stress. It's not designed to deal with long-term imagined stress about the future.
mm,
So something really, really important we need to do is anytime we realize we're thinking about the future and we're worried about the future in a fearful way, we have to become aware of it, first of all. Just recognize that. And then if you can take a step back from it and just let the thoughts go for a moment, which means releasing control, because we're trying to control it by worrying about it. Right? If you can stop trying to control it for a moment and just think like right now, this moment, right here, right now, I'm okay. I'm physically safe. Everything's okay right now. Slowly breathing down back into the present moment. That'll get the blood flowing back into your logic rather than your emotional
mm,
center. And then you can, from that place, begin to think about maybe a more positive focus, how you'd like it to be instead of the fearful outcome. What if I could think about maybe how I'd like it to be instead of what I've been worrying it's going to be? And if you can do that, that's a really simple exercise you can practice doing. And if you practice that, that becomes conditioning too. So you can condition yourself in a positive way, right?
mm,
So that'll be a really good thing if people could practice that, just to learn to do that.
mm.
Recognize when you're
Okay.
futurizing, let it go for a moment, really focus on the present moment, and then think, okay, how would I like it to be instead? There's three simple steps.
Mm. Recognize, focus on the present moment, and then ask yourself, how would you like it to be instead?
Yes.
Right. And
Yeah,
I'm glad there's also something called, positive conditioning.
absolutely. Yes.
Right, because I mean, when we talk about conditioning, it's always negative, right? So
Mm.
the way we're conditioned negatively, we can actually start to rewire our brain to, condition ourselves positively also. So I'm
Yes.
glad that it's possible,
Yeah.
basically.
No, it's good
Right.
to well done. Good to put the positive tint on it as well. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right, right. So I want us to also, touch on relationships, success, and the whole concept of self-worth, right? Like you said, you're actually worthy. It's the perception. There's a way you put the English about, self-worth,
Mm.
right? Everyone is worthy. It's your perception of yourself that matters,
Yes.
right? So, right. So, talking about self-worth, right? So how does, low self-worth affect the people we choose and the lives we build?
Okay, so someone who has a low perception of their self-worth may hold themselves back in a situation instead of saying yes to something, they may say no, and they
Mm,
may choose a partner who's less acceptable, shall we say, or inappropriate for them. Let's say if they got low self-worth or perception of low self-worth and they used to being treated badly when they were younger or the growing up years, they will tend to attract a partner who will make them feel the same way in general. If, and that may be in an intimate relationship, or maybe they go to work and their boss or their colleague does the same thing. Someone who's bullied
mm,
at school may get bullied by a colleague. Someone who doesn't believe in themselves, has low self-worth that way, doesn't believe in themselves, they may not put themselves into situations where there could be a great opportunity for them. But they think, no, I don't deserve that. That's not for me. That's for somebody else. So these kind of examples, or it can come across in like health and well-being. So someone with low self-worth may sabotage their health. They may, overeat, for example, because that's the way of compensating for what they're feeling.
mm.
And or maybe they just don't take care of themselves. Maybe they're not healthy. Maybe they just eat poor food all the time, or that gives them bad nutrition. So there's lots of ways it can manifest. Yeah.
Wow. All right. It's funny because people don't know about this, right? They do not think your emotions have a way of showing up in your daily life, in your habits and your routines. People
Mm.
do not think, your mental health could affect those aspects of your life, right? So I'm glad that the awareness is gradually coming out, and I'm glad that we're also talking about that. And the sole purpose of my podcast is to give advice to the younger generations,
Mm.
right? So finally, I would love for you to speak to someone out there, specifically people in their 20s, because most of them they feel left behind, lost, or should I say uncertain basically. So, what is your perspective on that, and what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's lots of questions in one there, really, because there's so many things going on in the world at the moment, especially changes occurring
Mm,
and young
mm,
people coming into their 20s, early 20s. There's relationships that are changing because of all the online world and the remote world. The career and work is changing because of AI. There's so many uncertainties going on, and uncertainty is a huge creator of anxiety.
mm,
If you're in a queue somewhere and you don't know what's going on, it's far more stressful not knowing what's happening than if they tell you this has happened and then you got to wait. So it's the uncertainty is really difficult. So if anyone can learn to deal with uncertainty and accept that it's okay not to know, that's a
mm,
huge skill, especially for young people trying to work out their future. I don't know what's going to happen, and that's okay. If I focus in the present moment, if I focus on myself, if I focus on my innate value, if I can just trust myself, find my own inner voice, and be myself in something, make that my focus, so that everything I do comes from that place, somehow that just makes things fall into place. And it may not seem obvious, first of all. I think Steve Jobs, the guy who founded Apple, he said it only makes sense, or the dots only make sense when you look back. Right?
mm,
So when you're looking forward,
mm.
it's really hard to see that. So I'd say to anybody in that situation, yeah, just do that. Learn to be okay with uncertainty. Learn to realize it's okay not to know, and learn to be able to deal with that, let go of it, and come back into the present moment and focus on what you can focus on.
Right. Okay, so yes, thank you, Andrew. Personally, I would say I've learned a lot from this conversation, right? And I believe my listeners would also learn and, start to implement it in their daily life, right? Start to live life fully and happily and be your actual self, right? So, yes, thank you, Andrew. And finally, before you go, where can listeners get to, learn more about you and also connect with you?
Oh, sure. It's a real pleasure to talk, by the way. If they want, my book, The Real You, is available, Penguin,
Mm.
Amazon, all the usual places. That'll give people a really good understanding of themselves. If they want to connect with me personally, my website is andrewparr.org. And if they're interested in training and what I do, because I train people to help others in this way, andrewparracademy.org. Any of those places will get in touch with me. And any of your listeners can send me a question. I'll do my best to help them out and answer it for them.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew Parr. And I'll put the links in the show notes so it's easily accessible for listeners. And to my listeners, I would say thanks for tuning into Conversations with Sekani. If this episode sparked something in you, just as it did in me, make sure to share to someone who you think might need this. And also subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. Once again, thank you, Andrew, and do have a wonderful day ahead of you.
Thank you so much. And I really, really appreciate you inviting me and asking
Um,
such questions. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care.